So, my topic today is God's timing. I just got my coffee and I was waiting on some Uber deliveries, but I cancel. Well, I don't say I cancel them. I deny a lot of them because they want me to go like 9 or so miles for a few bucks. I can't do that. I spend money putting gas in my tank, not to get a few dollars that doesn't even cover. So I just you know crossed out a few of the orders to where I'm not going to do them. So as I was doing one delivery that had a good amount, I was thinking about what I could talk about. And basically, what I do want to talk about is, like I said, God's timing. Because as of now, I'm waiting on God's provision for a place. And I've been in this place before, waiting on God and His timing. And when you have the responsibility of the world on your shoulders and you're learning to relinquish control to Jesus, you have that pressure. The pressure of the circumstance, not sure if He's going to come through. And I had dealt with that. But when you come to know God as your source and your provider, then the pressure becomes less because you have relinquished any responsibility that you have in this world to Him. So, like I said, as of now, I'm waiting on God's provision for a place. He told me that it is coming, and He said that it's not happening now at this moment because there are things that I need to learn. And, He has become my teacher according to John 6:45. He could become all our teachers if we just, sit and listen to Him. He can show us that He provides, but whether we're going to relinquish control to Him is another thing. Like I said in other videos, is that I have become readily available to Him because I'm not burdened down with the expectations and the responsibility the world throws at you. I'm just doing what Jesus wants me to do. So I had wrote a few notes, and I can really get into them when I stop my car because I just got my coffee, and so I'm going to sit and go over whatever I have. But what I have down first is that we live in a microwave society. You put food in the microwave, you want it done by a certain amount of time. We do that. We're not into the habit of waiting. And so that is just when you learn God is your provider, He makes you wait for the very purpose of dealing with any expectations that you have on yourself or you have on another. It could be expectations you may place on God, like I had done from hearing testimonies of how God has done in one person's situation. And then you begin to think, oh, maybe God works that way, but He doesn't work that way. He only worked for that one person. God's plan for each of us is different in how He works in each of our lives. So He's going to do things the way He wants to do them. And it's going to be in His timing. We may not like that, but, that's what He's dealing with, not only in me, but in so many others. It could be God's timing regarding healing. It could be God's timing regarding provision. Who knows what it could be? I've heard many times that God is an 11:59 God. And that entails that He doesn't come through right away because He has His reasons. So it's just something that we need to learn to deal with. He wants to put down our flesh so that we can walk in the Spirit. and then we can answer by the Spirit. The more that you relinquish control to Him, the less the pressure is, and you're not worried about timing anymore. I mean, it would depend on circumstances in which you could feel pressure. Maybe you're waiting on God's provision for a place and you have a deadline. Well, at first you're going to be concerned, and I'm sure you still feel that concern in some ways, even if you do see Him as your provider. But I think that concern is wondering if He's going to come through. And I had dealt with that myself, waiting on God. But I know God is love, and He knows our deadlines, so we just need to keep that in mind. So like I said, we live in a microwave society. When we want something done, we want it done now. But God is not going to answer according to our stress level. That stress level is what we put on ourselves. He doesn't put that on us. Because we want things done according to our timing, and we've learned to live that way. And that's not how God works. He wants us to learn to give everything to Him, even our stress, to where the stress is not even an issue anymore. So I am parking now, and I'm going to start working on this video. So like I already said, God doesn't answer according to our stress. We have to see basically from His perspective. And Jesus touched on that. He said, seek first His kingdom and His righteousness. When you're doing things according to this world, how the world functions regarding expectations and responsibilities, then you're operating out of this kingdom. He doesn't want us to do that anymore. We have to seek first His kingdom, His way of doing things. What is His way? Well, it's what Jesus had taught when He was on earth. Everything that He said, that was from His kingdom. Loving your enemies, that was from His kingdom. Doing things that we don't want to do according to our flesh, He told us to do the opposite, which is from His kingdom. So seeking God's provision, it goes against this kingdom that we live in, because this world has laws against anybody that receives help from outside sources. So when you can learn not to operate out of that, but you operate out of His kingdom, then, He provides. So when He did that with me in my rest, telling me not to work, but to rest in Him, that was going against the laws of that kingdom. But He came through, not only for my purpose, but for anybody who witnessed my situation. And so, like I had said, if he promised something, it will be according to His timing. Now, look at different examples. You have Lazarus. He was sick, and Jesus told, I guess, the messenger that he will come. But he waited, I believe, an extra day, and then he found out that Lazarus had died. And, we have to wonder, why didn't He go right away? And I believe God had a reason for that. He didn't do anything unless His Father told Him to do it. So I'm guessing He saw God's timing in that. And the Father said, I don't want you to go yet. So then you deal with the repercussions of other people who are looking at God's timing. They want things done when they want things done. But God doesn't work that way. We wait on Him. And so Lazarus ended up dying, and, people can look at that as God failed them. But God didn't fail them. What happened? God used Jesus to raise Lazarus from the dead. So, God has a reason. We don't see it at the time. But after, the the issue ends, the trial ends, then we can see why things happen the way they did, why God worked the way he did. Then you look at, the children of Israel at the Red Sea. Here, they're at the sea, there's no way for them to go, and the Egyptians are gaining up on them. And so what can they do? They can't obviously go back to where they were because they would die from the Egyptians. But God, what did he do? He opened the Red Sea. Well, I'm sure that they were looking at the circumstance. Okay, God, whatever you're going to do, please do it now. God has his timing. And God did what he did for the very purpose of taking care of the Egyptians, and then also showing the Israelites what he could do by splitting the sea. Then we also have the example of manna in the desert, where the Israelites were hungry and they wanted food. Well, they didn't have any food with them. And then they started thinking about Egypt and how they wanted to go back and all that. And I mean, that would tick me off if I was God. But God doesn't do things according to our wishes and what we want. He does it his own way, and he has reasons for that. So he provided manna in the desert. Each took, waiting upon God, learning to relinquish control of what we would normally do and give it to God. Like I had said, I waited for God's provision regarding an apartment. It took months. Yeah, I would have liked to have it right away, but there were things that I needed to learn. And just the way that God had provided and just how he did it, he knew exactly how much we needed for that place, and he provided that. But he taught wisdom. He was teaching me along the way about, different things that this world follows and what he didn't want me to follow anymore. So instead of looking at the circumstance itself and, looking at your watch and looking at the calendar, you look at Jesus and you spend your time like Mary did, sitting at his feet and listening to him. Putting away outside distractions and just focusing solely on Jesus and what he wants you to learn in this time. So that is basically what I'm doing right now. Of course, I'm not going to give, details about what I'm going through right now. But let's just say that I'm just waiting on God and what he wants me to do. And I'm learning from him. I had said in, other videos about the car, when I was driving my car and I got to the exit, all of a sudden it stopped because I guess, we ran out of gas, and there was also a fuel pump issue, I think. And that costed like $400. So to make a long story short, a brother picked us up. A sister referred us to an honest mechanic. I called them and they picked the car up, and they said that the bill was over $400 and it would be that to get fixed. And so I asked if they could keep the car on their lot, and they graciously did so. And it was on their lot for a good amount of time. And if you allow it, you let the world come in, you let fears come in, and the enemy works against that because he can tell when you're afraid. I guess whatever the aura is you're dealing with. It's like I heard different things regarding, auras and whatever. So if somebody's jealous, the enemy knows what you're feeling from that by the color you're emitting. Sounds weird, but that's what I've heard. And it makes sense. If you're angry, I'm sure that's another color. So then the enemy works against that. So with the car, God was dealing with my fears. His provision didn't come right away, but it came. But there were things for me to learn. And that was, for me to learn, was how to deal with the pressure I was feeling. and learning to combat fear with faith. How did I do that? Well, it was past testimonies in which God had come through in my own life. So that was cause for me to deal with that fear itself. And the fear is you're wondering if God is not going to come through, which he loves us. He will come through. He knows your needs. He knows your hands are tied. So what can you do? So I'm getting to the last section. And, when we're waiting on God, we don't know all that he's doing behind the scenes. We can't see everything. If we could see everything that God was doing, then there wouldn't be learning about faith. There wouldn't be learning about dealing with pressure. We have to not be able to see what God is doing so that we can be in that place of awe when he does come through. Who knows in this waiting on God what you need to learn? I mean, there could be learning experiences Jesus wants to teach you. Like I had said about Lazarus, Jesus waited to go and heal him because he was waiting on his Father. And what happened? Well, God used Jesus to heal him and bring him back to life. I think about Job, and he was wondering why he was going through what he was going through. The boils, and then losing his children, and his wife giving him a hard time, and having so-called friends who were just trying to point out his sin to him. Maybe you did this wrong. Maybe you did that wrong. Maybe that's why you're suffering. But it said Job was a righteous man. And he was wondering why God was allowing him to go through what he was going through. We didn't see everything that, God was doing, why he was doing it. But God knew Job. He knew he was righteous. So God was proving a point to Satan that no matter what you do, he is not going to curse me. That is what God said to him. So, that happens. God is working behind the scenes, and we can't, do like what a lot of people are doing, like putting a judgment out on God, because we don't know everything God is doing. And God answers Job back in that last chapter, I believe, telling him, have you considered this? Do you know about this? Or do you know about that? And Job said that, he keeps his mouth shut because he spoke of things too great for him to imagine. He knew that God was behind it all, and he was working out everything for his good, and that he's doing that along with us as well. God knows what is best for each of us. God has a plan for each of us. So I just wanted to encourage you with that if you are waiting on God's timing on something, then know that if it isn't happening right away, he has a reason. It's not that he's trying to torture you or anything. He's not the enemy. God has reasons. And like I said, if you're dealing with pressure and stress of something, that's not something that God puts on you. It's what we put on ourselves. It's just learning to relinquish control to God to where we get rid of the pressure. So I'm going to end things here. Thank you for taking the time to listen.